Welcome to another one of the TechSoup Connect Canada meetups. I'm delighted that you've all been able to join us here today on a morning slash afternoon slash whatever fancy time zone you might happen to be in. My name's Eli, and I'm one of the hosts here, along with Ben, who will be managing the chat and making sure everything runs smoothly here today. It was actually Ben who came to me about a month ago and said, "Here's this interesting blog post I've just found. What do you think about doing something on Bluesky?" And I, of course, said, "Is it a real thing?" And so I put a post up on LinkedIn. And so what did I learn? Yes, Bluesky is turning into a real thing. And I think it's time for us as nonprofits curious about technology and the social web to do a little bit of exploration and digging to see if it fits with our particular communities and our particular mission. And so I'm super delighted that we have got a guest expert coming in from the UK, the person who originally wrote that blog post that Ben forwarded to me and said, "This is worth our attention." So with us here today is Madeleine Sugden, who is a digital specialist with over 20 years of experience in charity communications in the UK, where she supports small and large charities to maximize their digital communications. Madeleine specializes in strategic planning, but also gives day-to-day support to run digital health checks, training, and managing website projects. She also co-founded Radio Lento, a mindfulness podcast of beautiful sound postcards, which actually sounds fascinating and exactly what I need in my life. With that, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Madeleine.
Lovely to see you all. Sorry I've had to get up so early. It's 5 p.m. here in London, and the sun is just reaching that beautiful golden time of the day. So it's lovely to spend some time with you talking about Bluesky. I'm really talking about how it's evolved in the UK, what's happened in the charity sector across digital space, and where it might be going. And really excited to find out what your experience is too. So how things are where you are, where you see it going, whether you see it as a kind of viable alternative. So I'm going to go through lots of examples, some questions, take you through some basics of Bluesky if you haven't come across it already. Yeah, feel free to add questions in the chat. We'll get to them. We'll have some time at the end as well, but hopefully it'll be a nice, relaxed, interesting exploration into where things are at. I'm just going to pause when I want you to go forward, if that's all right, rather than saying next. So I think really the questions that we've been looking at in the UK are whether our charities have got a future on X, given all the stuff that's been going on, and whether Bluesky is that kind of natural alternative, and what are the options and what are the opportunities for growing and thriving on Bluesky? Is it worth it? It's been such a challenging time. There's so much change. We haven't even started to think about all the changes at Meta and how that's influencing our charities. Bluesky was an earlier kind of opportunity to ask those questions, and certainly in the UK, it's moved a bit further forward. So it's a changing landscape, lots and lots to think about. Just a bit about me. So I had a career in charity websites going back to kind of 1996 when I started working in charity websites. I worked at RNIB, which is a big sight loss charity in the UK, and also helped build Know How Nonprofit, which was a website aimed at small charities, helping them to do anything and everything to do with running a small charity. And now I've been a consultant for about 14 years. So I help charities with their websites and their digital skills and their social media and their strategic stuff and everything in between. Every project is different, and that's why my job is so brilliant. So if we think about what's happening on X, so if we kind of think back 2.5 years ago or so when Elon took over, which was October 2022, which just feels like a lifetime ago. And since then, it feels like it's becoming increasingly toxic. Certainly lots of the charities that I speak to are finding it very difficult to be on there. Generally, engagement has dropped. So accounts that were previously quite successful, they were reaching the people and they were making a difference and driving fundraising or driving engagement. And those things have just fallen. The end, it feels like the number of users is dropping too. But it hasn't been a seismic change. Lots of charities are still very much business as usual there, even though the numbers are not great, but that's where their home is, and so they've stayed. So there has been this change, but there hasn't been a massive departure on a huge scale. That said, quite a few charities have done what I call loud quitting, where they've made a big announcement, right, we can't be here anymore, we're going to move on. And some charities with quite big followings. So I think the biggest one that there's been so far has been mine, which is a mental health charity, and they had 500,000 followers on X. They left in January, but they did have a bit of a backlash. The statement that they wrote was it wasn't worded very well. It said, it's not the right place for us to reach people anymore, so we're not going to be here any longer. And then there was quite a lot of comments underneath that post of people saying, oh, so you only want to support people who've got the same political views as you, and actually we need help too. And it didn't go very well, and it was very well worded and therefore caused that backlash. But other charities have left, and there's been no kind of real impact on that, negative comments. So there have been lots of small charities leaving. So on average, I'm seeing at the moment about 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 leaving each week. But the big boys are still very much on X. And if we think about what's happening there to give us that kind of toxicity, it's so many different levels of it. So we've got kind of Elon and his endless negative tweets about different things. So this example was from December or January, when he wrote a poll saying, America should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government, yes or no? And there were like over 1 million views, and it was mostly yes, unfortunately. So that was him setting the scene, and just, do we want to be on a platform where somebody is using their power? And obviously since the inauguration, we've seen things ramp up another level. We've also seen Nigel Farage, who's an MP, who's whipping up stuff there. We've always seen comments underneath RNLI, which is a charity that rescues people from difficult situations at sea. And they've spent a lot of stuff in the press about how they rescue people that are arriving on small boats. And they just get endless comments underneath their messages, which are negative and difficult to deal with. We see lots of adverts. Every third tweet, I think, for me at the moment, is an advert of dubious quality. There's AI stuff in there which kind of interrupts our ability to be clear about the messages that we put out. And then the bottom left example there is from the Welsh Refugee Council, and Musk done some promotion of them in a kind of derogatory way, and they got a massive backlash and had to close their account, and also had to call the police about some real life trolling as a result of that. So those are extremes of where things are at for us in the UK, but that's a small snapshot. It's been interesting to see when people have joined Bluesky instead, there's this kind of sense of relief. I see people saying, oh, I don't have to take a deep breath when I log in the morning, and I can just feel like I'm there, and it feels like it's a safer, happier kind of place to be. Whether that will stay the same in 6 months, a year time is a difficult question, but as a kind of real indication of the difference of the culture and feel of the place, that is something I'm seeing quite a lot. So for any charity I'm working with, these are the questions that I'm asking. So comms teams should be not just thinking about the culture and the ethics of Elon's platform, although that is a significant part of it. The other questions are around, is this still a place where we've got engagement and our posts are reaching the people that we want to reach? Is the algorithm working against us? Is just the number of people that we're connecting with camping anyway? So what does that mean about the size and the profile of the audience that we have? How has that changed? Are we seeing the people that we want to connect with? Are we reaching the local area, or are we followed by lots of bots that actually, the number of followers that we have is a vanity metric because it's not actually real people? And also our peers or our decision makers that we want to influence, are they there as well? Are the people that we're actually wanting to reach still using the platform? There's a really useful checklist which Charity Comms, which is a charity in the UK, have produced, which helps charities to ask themselves those questions. It's not a straightforward thing. I get that we've built up a large following often on X, and it's a difficult thing to leave behind. And we might have our own views of it internally, but that might not be the same as the trustees have, or our senior managers have, or even our followers have. So we have to take all those things into account when making those decisions. Saying that, I think some organizations reach a tipping point and they're just not going to put up with it anymore and decide that enough's enough. But every organization is different. but also where you are today might not be where you are in 6 months' time. And so it's just having that kind of longer view ahead about where you might be. So I think the question is Blue Sky the alternative? I think since we've been talking about the demise of Twitter for 2.5 years, we've been looking around for that alternative. So was it Mastodon? Was it Threads? Is it Blue Sky? And I think when we went through that journey, there wasn't really a natural, easy next step to give us that real-time comms space. But in the UK, enough things shifted, so it meant that Blue Sky felt like it was the alternative. So in September, lots of MPs joined, lots of news sites, journalists, and charity people all started joining Blue Sky. So there was something about that culture that was coming and changing, which meant that there was enough of a kind of groundswell in order for lots more organizations to join. So then there was a big spike at the start of November around the election. So in September, there were 10 million users. And then by November, 23 million users worldwide by the end of the month. And then currently, I think it went over into 32 million this week. So it's much slower. And I was expecting a much bigger uplift around January 20th, but that didn't really come in the way that I was expecting. So we have a quick look about how it actually works. So it works in a very similar way to X. So it's got that kind of real-time feel. There's no algorithm, which is different. So you will just see a chronological list of messages that are coming in. And you won't see things which are amplified based on how popular they've been or whether the algorithm likes them or not. It just is a kind of true in-time feed, which is quite refreshing. There's a 300 character limit rather than whatever it is on X these days. You can post GIFs, you can post videos, you can do threads in the same way that you can do on X, use hashtags. And then one thing that is different is starter packs. And these definitely helped charity Twitter in the UK to grow, where organizations and individuals were building lists of accounts that were appearing. So people could, rather than having to go around and search for all the people that they loved from the other place, they could look through somebody's starter pack and follow everybody all in one go. I started doing starter packs of UK charities so that, again, I just could get a sense of who was joining and what that kind of frequency of adaptation looked like. I'm now on my third starter pack of UK charities. Each starter pack has a limit of 150. I'm about to finish the third starter pack. Whether I'll start a fourth, it is a question I shall ask myself in the middle of the night one day if I've got the energy to do it. But so I've got 3 starter packs of UK charities, as a pack of supporter organisations, so kind of infrastructure of the sector, one of community centres and one of hospices. And they're all growing all the time. So and I only put charities on when they are active. Lots of charities set up accounts and haven't done anything with them, and I haven't included those in the packs. I only want to include ones that are actively using it. So it's been interesting to see that growth, but it's definitely slowed down now. So in terms of safety and security, so it's similar as on X, so mute, block, report, although maybe it's more effective on Blue Sky than it is on X with the different changes that happen to take back and roll back some of that functionality. Here there is an alt text prompt, so you can be reminded to include alt text to make sure that your images have that alternative text so that somebody who hasn't got images or is using a screen reader can understand what that picture is about. There was some concern about the verification, so the kind of security, especially for large organizations where anybody could basically set up as Oxfam or set up as Save the Children, but there are increasingly features involved now where you can verify your account, and they said that there's more coming. They're saying that there's more paid for features coming. Haven't seen those yet. There isn't a stats function built in, but there's third-party different functions that you can use, and no draft or schedule function inbuilt. But again, you are starting to be able to use Blue Sky on some of the scheduling platforms now. It's interesting looking at the charities that have joined. As I said, I'm adding all of them all of the time to watch who's coming and watching people sharing their first post and everybody celebrating that they're there. And there's different ways of doing that. I did a bit of research looking to get a kind of different overview, because it was very exciting to be in the middle of seeing everybody joining, and that kind of gave a different picture about how that encouragement and new starting was happening. But actually, I decided to go and have a look at the top 10 UK charities. So I found a list of a piece of research which suggested the top 10 charities by popularity. So I went and looked and saw how many of those were still posting on X and how many were on Bluesky. And out of that top 10, I think only 4 were on Bluesky and all of them were still on X. And lots of them have got a big following. So Macmillan Cancer have got 643,000 followers on X but aren't on Bluesky yet. That kind of told me something different, that although Bluesky seemed to be having this kind of big moment, actually a lot of them were still on X and very much business as usual over there. So when I did this research in January, I think the last tweet for was like the day before or something. No real sign of slowing down. But saying that, some have grown really fast. So there are some really popular accounts. So you might have seen the Museum of English Rural Life, which is a museum which operates out of university. So not strictly speaking a charity, but is one of the stars of non-profit UK Twitter, as was, and had a big viral moment a couple of years back where they posted a picture of a huge great sheep, which they said was called the Absolute Unit. And it's their kind of iconic. They've got T-shirts with it on. They've got mugs now on it because it was such a kind of massive thing. This kind of some interesting thing about a crossover about a viral thing having a physical presence. And now it's actually on the wall of a museum because it was such an iconic viral moment in digital history. So their first tweet was the same viral thing that they did back on X, and everybody was like, oh my god, it's amazing they're here and I can delete my X account now because you're here. And so their account has grown really fast because they're really good at using digital comms to connect with people. But then organizations who don't have a sheep to use are also doing really well. So Full Fact are still on X and they've got 46,000 followers on Bluesky. Hope Not a Hate is still on X and they've got 32,000 here. National Trust also still on X, got 17,000 on Bluesky, but only joined in around Christmas time. And JRF also still on X and have got 17,000. So it's those accounts are growing. Then they haven't got as big followers as maybe they've got on X, but they are seeing much more engagement there. And I think those ones that are doing really well are ones that are using it properly. So they're not just coming in once a week and sticking something in and going away again, but they're using it in the same way that we all did when we started X, where we're building it up and connecting with people and being topical and being responsive and being interesting and responding to people and all those things that we did to be social on social media. And so it's interesting to look at some of that. We can do some comparisons for organizations that are still doing in both places. So doing that mirror publishing. So here are 2 examples. So RSPB, which is a big conservation charity. So they've got 421,000 followers on X and 27,000 on Bluesky. So a fraction on Bluesky in comparison. And this photo that they shared of a bird with its wings lit up from below with golden sunshine had so much more engagement on Bluesky. So 2.1 thousand likes on Bluesky, whereas they had 265 only on X. They're massively bigger following on X instead. Similarly, RNIB, so the Sight Loss Charity, did an interactive thing on Braille's birthday saying you could send them your name and they would turn it into Braille as a graphic that you could use. And again, they've got 53,000 followers on X, only 2,000 followers on Bluesky. And again, it generated so much more engagement on Bluesky instead of on X. So it's really interesting to have those comparisons just to see that I think once you reach a certain level of maybe 2,000 plus followers, and if you've done that work to build up that audience, then your engagement can be much stronger on Bluesky, which isn't to say that you should just walk away from X. Maybe that time will come in the future, but it's about understanding where that potential sits. So I think there's the question about whether it's right for you. And I think these are the questions that I'd be asking about. Do you have the time to build a new community? Are your community actually using Bluesky? Do you want to help to make that change? Is that happening within your space? If enough of your peers come, is that enough to make that happen? Get a bit frustrated with the UK charity sector in that I've got a list of about 70 or so that have set up accounts but haven't done anything with it yet. But actually, if we all just started using it, then it might turn into something even bigger and might become a kind of stronger alternative. But if we leave it to certain big players, then it's not It's not really giving us that kind of galvanized time and that galvanized space. So is our audience here, or are they likely to be, or can we help them to be? Are the people that we want to connect with here? So that might be your major donors, it might be your funders, it might be the local press, it might be whoever it is, decision makers, journalists, lots of potential for connecting with people, but only if they're there as well. How does it fit within the social media, within the comms mix? Have you got capacity to take on something new? Are you rethinking your whole comms strategy in light of what's happening in social media and refocusing on your newsletter and your websites? That's the advice that we're sharing across the charity sector at the moment. Is actually it feels very unstable that we're all basing our comms strategy on social media, where we have built up these big communities. But as we've seen, those things are shaky ground. Our websites and our newsletters are much stronger. We've got more kind of control over them. I think there's also a question about what do we lose by not being on Bluesky, given that the UK sector is quite sophisticated there now. If you're not on there and people want, if I was doing a marathon for Macmillan, I can't mention them and get them to share it with all their people because they're not on there. Or if I've got a news story about a charity, I can't mention them and they're not watching what people are saying. So even though they're not necessarily wanting to use it actively, by not having a press, they're still missing out on those insights. I think also a question about what does success look like. So for early days for a platform, you might expect not much impact, and that's okay. You have to give yourself the time to build that up. I think also thinking what I see lots of people just coming and using their old Twitter strategy and using it on Bluesky instead. But maybe it's a different platform. Maybe it's a different feel. Certainly it's a space where we can be more playful. We can have more fun. We can be silly. The world is such a miserable, dark place increasingly at the moment. Actually, all I want to see is big pictures of sheep. Maybe that's where your space is. Maybe it's about giving joy or giving inspiration or showing beauty or being fun or giving people quizzes or just something to make people feel happy again, like social media used to in the olden days. I think also it can be an insurance policy. So when something crisis happens or when something happens in the news, you've got a space where you can go and talk about it easily without having to build a new page on your website or send out a newsletter. So today in the UK, there was an announcement about how we're going to be spending more on defence and that money is coming out of overseas aid. And so all the overseas aid charities have been able to respond really quickly and say that we don't think this is a good idea. But if they weren't on those channels, then they wouldn't be able to communicate it in that space. So it's an insurance policy for when stuff happens, they need to respond quickly. So some top tips. So I think this is what I say to UK charities: claim your account so that somebody else doesn't take it for you. You can add in your logo, your banner image, your description, your links. You can just sit there. That's fine. It was interesting. There were a few that set up their accounts and they got quite big followings really quickly without doing anything. And that felt like the moment when they should have started actually posting. But I think capacity issues or strategic planning doesn't mean that's. So there's something about at what point you decide to go and have a look at it and actually start doing it. So follow others, use starter packs. You can use Sky follower bridge to map your followers from X into Bluesky. So that could be a kind of fast track way of building up a community. And then I think the ones that do it well have done really interesting first posts. So it might be fun, it might be topical, might remind people about your mission or what you do or your impact or your location or your ideas or something that's really brilliant that's happened before. Lots of different things that the organizations are doing. But I think as a kind of good rule of thumb, it's good to be interactive, to be social, to post more, just to be present and make social fun again. And then build your presence. So tell your communities that you're there, put it in your newsletter, share it on other channels, and then share interesting content, which is what you would hopefully be doing anyway, sharing content which people want to comment on, they want to share, they want to click on, they want to like. We don't want people just to move past and not start looking at things, but what's engaging stories can you tell? How can you make it interesting? Don't be boring. And then keep reviewing your strategy. Do you think that Bluesky will replace X for you? You're going to do dual publishing, mirror publishing. What works for you? What works for your peers? What works for other charities? What works for news sites or brands that you like? Just spend some time looking thinking, trying new stuff, see what happens. And I think once you've been on there, you can say hello again. New people are joining all the time. So just because you sent something a month ago that worked doesn't mean you can't share it again, because we've got this kind of new churn of people arriving. Some useful links. So there's a post about Bluesky that's Charity. I think that's one I wrote. And then one that Charity Comms wrote, which has got a useful checklist. How to leave Twitter gracefully by Strawberry Social. And how another one about using the right channels. I think that's really useful to think about. Just a quick overview. It will take time to build up a community. Just will, won't it? It's just a long process. But I think it takes all of us as a sector and for you to make it work as an active, inspiring, positive, safe place for everybody to enjoy. But remember that social media is borrowed land. We are creating these communities in spaces that could change. The algorithms could change. The payment structure could change. We need to think about that and remember that these are borrowed lands. Don't assume that what worked before on X will still work. This is a new space and it does feel slightly different. And therefore optimize your own spaces. So your website, your email, your stewardship, all the good stuff that you do to connect with people. Think you can review your KPIs, think about what success, but also I would always come back to good branding, good messaging is still the most important thing. So that's the kind of slides, but I'm interested to hear where things are at with you. Maybe Stephanie, if you've got particular insights into how the organizations that you're aware of are using it or not using it, or the decisions that they're facing.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Stephanie. I'm the communications manager at Coast Funds, which is an Indigenous-led conservation finance organization based in Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh Territory, or Vancouver. Yeah, we claimed our Bluesky handle the beginning of 2024, so we were actually a really early adopter. And we did that thing where we claimed the handle and we did almost nothing for 6 months. And then in November, after the American election, we had 1,100 new followers in a month on Bluesky, and it blew up for us in a week. And we now have our Bluesky following is half of what our Twitter or X following was. We've had a lot of success, largely because we were early and well positioned. So I'm now thinking about that as I look at other platforms like PixelFed, maybe if that takes off as another federated platform. I can jump that much. I'm at Coast Funds. But we stopped purchasing advertising on X in 2023 after new management took over. And we no longer post regularly on X anymore. So it's just, we're keeping the account and the handles so that nobody else can take it. And also so that we can view posts that are on X, because you can't look at other people's posts unless you have an account. We also have a board chair who's very active on X. So not being able to see his posts would be a pretty big loss for us. But yeah, we are no longer posting regularly there.
And did you make that announcement? Have you kind of made?
Yeah. No, we just made a quiet shift. We made a small announcement in our newsletter, just for followers. You can find us on Bluesky, but we haven't made the quitting announcement for X. Ultimately, I'm not sure it's necessary. Yeah, we just had more success with a more positive strategy of sharing good news stories wherever we happen to be on the internet. And these days, it's Bluesky more often. Yeah, I guess I could also say that Twitter, our engagement numbers were dropping for well over a year. A lot of engagement we were getting was from accounts that looked like bots or were trying to sell us crypto because we're a finance organization. Okay. Not really what we were looking to get out of it. And the audience that we were looking to get from Twitter, which was like journalists, politicians, First Nation leaders, those are increasingly active on Bluesky. So it was just a much better match for us.
That's great. So you don't feel like you're losing anything by not being on X anymore?
No.
Amazing.
It's fantastic. Yeah. I really like that it seems to have like more of a newsy, progressive journalist, scientist bent to it, which works really well for our organization and the folks that we communicate with. Yeah, and we're also looking at meta platforms with a bit more scrutiny these days, but it's about 60% of our engagement comes through Facebook, especially is quite popular with First Nation communities in Canada. So it would be tough for us to leave
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah, where do you see that going? It feels in the UK those conversations are very early doors. That actually, similarly, lots of organisations are very reliant on those platforms, and it would be a massive shift really to move off them. And I can't see that happening particularly.
Yeah, I think everything you were saying earlier really resonates. Like diversify, try out a couple of these newer federated platforms. I hope that's the future of the internet when I'm in my more optimistic days. Yeah, and investing in things that you own, like your email list and your website.
That's the big one. Email list is the big one.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
would say email lists strategically. I have noticed that a lot of organizations have really pivoted to email, and it's like my inbox is stacked as an audience member.
And it was always difficult to be noticed in email to get somebody to actually open. So if therefore it's even more difficult to get people to open because everybody else is sending more emails, and to find new cunning methods to entice and engage people.
I know. I'm optimistic for the future of events, like gatherings like this where we actually talk to each other. It's nice.
Got a bunch of questions in the chat that I'm organizing. So let's start with Andrew Walker's question, which was the first question. Are analytics free or paid to view?
I think they're free. So somebody
Right.
sent me Sky Hub, so bskyhub.com. Free tools to track, analyze, and grow your Bluesky account. It says. I haven't
Right.
used it. That's what someone sent me.
Okay. The next question we have is from Bruce Roxburgh. Is there an SM aggregator to schedule posts for Bluesky or to cross post between X or Threads and Bluesky? That's a great question.
Yeah, I've not seen one, but I can't remember what platforms. People said that there are some platforms which allow you to manage all your accounts, and that Bluesky has been added to those, but I don't use those myself, so I don't know which ones they are, but there are some out there.
I think the most common one, the most well-known Vancouver one, given its history, might be Hootsuite, but it's paid. But I don't know what Hootsuite has done with Bluesky. I'm sure you could look in their website or look at their knowledge base or find something there on it. That's the first one I thought of because it's been around for so long, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Suite doesn't currently support Bluesky.
It doesn't?
No.
All right, more questions here. So Stephanie, you were asked a question about go ahead now. Buffer is the one? Let's take a look.
I've used that and it does seem to work fairly well. And if you're not that posty, you can probably get away with the free version for a while.
What do you mean by not that posty?
You can queue up, I think, about 10 posts before it starts saying, hey, how about money?
Yeah. Hootsuite used to be free for a long time, right? Now it's really expensive. I haven't looked at the price recently, but okay. So Stephanie, you answered the question organization called. I believe I saw that in the chat. Okay. Rena had a question. Question for Canadian orgs specifically, while other organizations in other countries are able to transition to meta platforms with the Canadian news block in place, I'm assuming she's referring to Bill C-18. What other options are Canadian organizations exploring? Is Bluesky one of the only options that we have other than X? Pardon me. And then she writes in brackets, also Team Vancouver as well. What do you think, Madeleine? Is that a question you can answer? Or does anyone... Oh, I'm working on Bluesky, but there's so much stuff going on. Is there anyone else you could answer? I don't know if anybody wants to come on mic and maybe answer that question.
I would just say LinkedIn is also an option for sharing news stories.
True.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing more charities using LinkedIn. I think as the kind of X started to dwindle a bit, then definitely LinkedIn took off more. And it's been really good to see that as a alternative, especially when organizations are very much kind of peer-to-peer or working in that professional space.
Okay, we answered Rita's question. I'm just looking what else is in the chat here. I dropped in here's Tara's question. Does anyone use automatic feeds that generate social media posts? I have so many roles that are nonprofit. I've never thought of considering something like auto-generating posts, but I'm so behind. And what I posted on Bluesky, it's been wonderful. The others we can't get off that I'm having issues keeping up. Was that a question?
So I guess it helped hearing that buffer is an option because we can use So I'm assuming you can also use Buffer for all the other social media sites. Okay, that's good. We don't do much with X at all, but we're still
Right.
there. Kind of like the reason why Stephanie said, like, our board members are active on it. So we
Right.
haven't really totally cut the cord yet, but slowly but surely, I've really been posting a lot on Bluesky. And what the awesome thing is that we had a huge donation from one of our posts the other day, and I keep using that as like the
Right.
huge reason to say, guess what? Look how great this site is. And we've never gotten a donation from X. We've never gotten actually, yeah, hardly any of our socials provided donation. One post on Bluesky, and it was like immediately it was $1,000, and that's a lot for us. We're
Awesome.
new with development, unfortunately, but
Right.
very happy to see that. So I'm hoping that's going to be like a big caveat to tell our board. So
Why do you think that happened? Is it just that you managed to cut through the noise, or it's a small space and therefore you just asked at the right time? What do you think made that happen?
I think it was a little bit of both, but the company that donated to us typically is a legal aid supporter because they do a lot of work for legal aid. Our funder is Legal Services Corporation, and they partner with them. So I think they support a lot of the legal aid organizations, but for them to be so active so quickly, it was like they could just cut through the noise, because how many times have we posted everywhere else? Like, you don't even hear anything. Yeah.
There's
Must have
something
found
about
it.
the kind of the culture of we're in a kind of really extreme time, and therefore I can see the people that are helping, and therefore I want to go and help them as well. So there's something about being in a crisis.
Absolutely. And we are, so legal service federally funded, and we didn't ask for any kind of giant increase for this year, but at the same time, an increase is an increase, and it is federal funding, so we are up against cuts. So I'm just grateful that I know they're aware of that, so they probably said, let's help these guys out.
But you must have found the right audience at the right time, and there must be
Yeah.
an audience. And I would think that through market research and amongst other things, you should dive down deeper into that one donation, Tara, and also figure out how you could, I don't want to say exploit. Maybe that's not the
No,
right
but
word, but
I did. I
know?
sent them a private, like in our
Yeah.
so in our
Yeah, that's
platform, our donation platform, I sent a private message to the donor and
Yeah.
basically
Yeah, that's
asked how
awesome.
we can partner on anything,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. But yes, I took the time not to just send our template. Thank you. I was like, no, I have to be very crafty on this. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, good for you, because like when you see something like that, you're like, wait, now I got to duplicate this 100 times.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Of course. And I made sure to send it Sunday afternoon, so they knew that I was like thinking about them on a Sunday. I have
Right.
the
It goes sometimes.
like off time. I just wanted them to know that I was grateful, and hopefully so we'll see. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Well, that kind of tells us
Thanks,
something,
Sarah,
doesn't
for the
it, about
question.
responding to something that's topical, being present, being front of mind, being a kind of leader. But all that, when we're in this time, it's about not just posting out the usual stuff, but actually being top of the game so that
Exactly.
people are
Yeah.
shareable and it connects with the right people, ticks all the boxes.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Well done.
Thank you.
So I would love to
Tyler?
quick comment that
Go ahead.
came in from Steve, who's talked about how there's a bit of complexity behind this idea, blue sky being borrowed land, in that there is this thing behind it called like the AET protocol, which technically means there is this ability for other people to set up their own compatible servers that would allow for it to be part of a decentralized network. That said, at a practical level, there aren't a lot of examples of that actually in use out there in the world. So it's in one of those places where there is like this potential theoretical way for us to not be reliant ultimately on Blue Sky, the company, but still be able to take those communities and bring them into other spaces. But I would say what we see right now is there isn't a lot of practical examples of that functionality being taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think there is I've seen a photo, a kind of, they're trying to make an alternative to Instagram, I think, aren't they? So I think, is that the pixel thing, the pink pixel thing that you were talking about? So using the similar functionality of Blue Sky, but applying it to a photo thing instead. So I think that was the first example that I'd seen I don't know. I don't know whether anybody has used it yet. Definitely
Yes.
used it.
Yeah. And the other thing I should share is that for those of you here today that made it to the top technology trends in nonprofits, which was January 22nd, Dawn Walker was one of our featured speakers. I spoke with Dawn prior to the presentation to have a conversation with Dawn about what she's doing, and her presentation relates to yours, Madeleine, because I'm just looking at the topic here, why it's time to move off big tech, social media, Bluesky, Mastodon, Pixel Fed, and more is one of the 5-minute, sorry, I'm just looking at it here. Anyway, Dawn's presentation talked about moving off major platforms. And then I'll find the link and share it in the chat, because there's some very useful information that I talked to Dawn about. And Eli, maybe you can share it too, because Dawn's started or is part of the CO Social Community Cooperative, which is a nonprofit community that provides open social media and collaboration for organizations and people in Canada. I think we're going to try and actually get Dawn to come back later this year as we use the tech trends as a way to gather speakers. I'll share that information here in the chat, and people can reach out to Dawn as well.
And are you seeing those conversations happening across your networks about that moving away from big tech? Or is it still, we talked about the kind of the meta bit, but is it still too early days or too complicated? What does that look like where you are?
That's a good question. That might be a better Eli question than a Ben question. I'm just trying to think, actually. I haven't probably explored it enough yet.
Yeah, what I'm seeing from the attendees here today is some are real early adopters, and often they're doing that for values-based reasons rather than maybe audience-based reasons initially. But I would say the majority of the sector right now is in, I think, a bit of a wait and see to say, what's going to happen next? They're waiting for the Stephanies to show the world, the early adopters who can light the torch and show people a potential path forward. So that's what I'm seeing right now in the sector, which is people are cautious. They're not leaping in because I think they've leapt into a number of platforms, leapt into Pinterest, they've leapt into all of Meta's platforms. And at some point, people are like, oh, we can't spread ourselves infinitely thin. Let's see which of these really emerges to become the place where their particular community, whether that's politicians and journalists, whether that's members of the public caring about health, like they're waiting to see where are their people and how can they reach the audience they're really trying to find.
Really hard, isn't it? I do worry about that waiting, because there's some really, I had conversation with NCBO, which is the kind of umbrella organization of UK charities, and they were waiting, watching, but they're still not on Bluesky. And I think actually we need the leadership of them. Everybody else that's waiting and watching, they're watching for them to do it, but they're watching, well, it's just circular and nobody's actually moving forward. But actually we need to, in order to make it happen, we all need to take a punt, but it needs the big boys to lead that way so that the rest of them follow, so they're not just watching anymore, but they're actually seeing it validated as the right place. So I completely understand that. And especially for smaller organizations that are very stretched with capacity. But at the same time, I want to see more action, and I want to see a bigger tipping point.
So to that point, Madeleine, maybe let's just end up with, if an organization has been in that waiting mode, what are the 2 things you would recommend they start with just to begin this process?
Yeah, if they've been lurking, I would expect that they would have built up, while they've been not posting, that they would start following people. They would get people to follow them, so that when they're ready to do the hooray, we're here, then that's going to get a much better response, and therefore it's going to validate them from being there. So being really clever about that first post. Is it an angry action? This is what we do. Is it a call to action? Is it a campaign? Is it a fluffy squirrel? Whatever it is that's right for that brand. So is setting the groundwork so that when you're ready to stop moving from lurking into real, then do it properly. And then from there, just carry on going. Don't just do a hooray, we're here, and then don't do anything again for a month's time, because that feels like a massive letdown.
Awesome. That's really helpful. It looks like we've tackled most of the questions so far. Madeleine, I want to say thank you so much for staying up late, and everyone else for
Only
coming
6
at an
o'clock.
unusual time. And I'm really excited to see how the rest of you engage and explore in this new space. And my hope is that one, it acts as the reminder, which we always need, that it is ultimately our websites, our newsletters, the core media that we own that has to be our primary sense of attention, but that we also get to play in these new places and say like, all right, what can I learn? What can be fun? What can be interesting? And who knows, maybe we as a group at TechSoup Connect British Columbia can also get in and see if maybe it's worth experimenting for us as well. So we aren't just talking about it, but we might actually walk the talk as well. We'll see. With that, thank you all. The
Thanks,
recording
Madeline.
will be sent out with all of you by email. So you'll be able to get the notes and slide through the video and see what happened. And otherwise, we will share this out. And so thank you all for coming and joining us. Although KW just came in with a round bang. For those who need to leave, enjoy your day. But Madeleine, if you've got a couple minutes, I'd love for you to get to tackle this set of 4 questions.
Definitely.
Will do. Thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you all.
Perfect. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for allowing us to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I don't know what the dimensions are. I'm sure there'll be something on the interwebs that says what the dimensions are. Character limits, again, it will tell you once you fill it in, just give it a go and to edit as you need to. The verification, there's a link within, hopefully it's within the presentation, there's a link to the verification. I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, we just have one question about sharing the slides after. And I mentioned that we would, if you registered, you get the post-event email link to the video. But I don't think people are able to see the chat. I can see why people would want the PowerPoint.
Here's the link about verification. So that
Okay.
is quite a technical thing, I think, to do the verification. But if you've got charity domain, then that is.
Is that the piece about linking it with your website and the
Yeah.
and the domain? Yeah, see, that's not for the faint at heart if folks are multiple roles in nonprofits and they're trying to modify DNS records. It's not
That
easy.
said, I did successfully set that up, and I am not super.
Yeah, but that's
technical.
you though.
But so I think you're right. Like it basically,
You're a smarty pants.
the person
when it comes
who
to
has
digital
helped you
marketing.
set up your domain name for your website can definitely make sure that this is quick.
Right.
This week. But Ben is right. It is a high risk, dangerous place to go into your DNS settings. So if you're a little bit nervous about it, find someone who can hold your hand through the process.
You could hold that.
I was going to say call Madeleine.
No,
Reach
call
out to
that.
Madeleine.
Not me.
Yeah,
not
no,
me.
I've done it. I've done it. It's okay.
And then the last question, are there specific ways
I
to
missed
promote
this.
or receive donations through Bluesky? No, nothing other than the usual stuff for promoting your donation page. So there's not a Facebook fundraising equivalent or anything like that.
Yeah, see, in looking at these questions, sorry I missed these, but I know that when Hootsuite put out something where I grabbed this years ago, Hootsuite had a cheat sheet for social media dimensions of all images on all platforms based on varying things, including things like banner images. And I had to make one for a company. So I just looked up, so I found the Hootsuite thing. It's probably still around. And then you would just like, oh, it's this many pixels by this many pixels. But then again, like the DNS, you have to be Photoshop savvy or something similar.
Awesome. Thank you all. Let me now wrap this all up.